Hello, everyone. My name is Savanni D'Gerinel. Most of you already know me, although there's a few faces that I don't recognize yet. Formerly the Linux technical lead at 1Password, now the desktop technical lead at 1Password. But we're not going to talk a lot about 1Password today. We're going to touch on it. I'm mostly going to talk today about the rather weird dialect of Linux that I run. You all hear me talking about it on occasion, whether I'm talking about Nix, Nixpkgs, or NixOS. So far as I know, I am not expecting to share any proprietary information at all in this video. And I imagine that if we're going to post to YouTube, if we do veer into any proprietary territory, we can just edit that out. We are going to get started here. I do not have slides today. I have decided that this is going to be a primarily demonstrational thing. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, actually, I will bring a web page open for it, is just the buzzword idea of what I'm doing here. This is the primary web page for NixOS. If you want to learn anything about these technologies, that NixOS is the search term to look for. Everything else becomes kind of hard to Google. And we're going to start out with Nix itself, which is incredibly hard to Google. Nix is two things. First of all, it is a fully functional programming language, as in not Lisp style, but more ML style programming language. It is functional, lazy, and has all kinds of stuff from being able to like compose functions and the things that you would expect with a functional programming language. But as a package manager, Nix uses that programming language to install packages, or it uses the output from the programming language as descriptions for how to download packages, how to build them, how to install them on your system, as well as how to deal with all of their dependencies and managing all of that. As a language, Nix is really analogous to like the RPM language or the deb language. As a package manager, it's really analogous to apt and DNF, but it does have some cool tricks to it. Nixpkgs is a collection of about 80,000 packages that are all described in the Nix expression language. At least that's what they say right now. I don't know how often, it says so on, well, here it says 60,000. I don't know how often this number actually gets updated. That includes libraries, it includes applications, it includes modules, which are how you get things installed as part of a coherent operating system. Which brings me to the third part, NixOS, which takes all of these ideas between Nix and Nixpkgs and actually puts them up into a complete operating system, which is the one that I have been running on my personal hardware for many years now. And as of a couple of weeks ago, when I rebuilt my work machine, I'm running it on my work machine as well. So lots of buzzwords there. Let's dig into how this really works. I'll introduce the first concept. Or we're not going to start at the operating system level. First, we're going to start at just what it means to install software. At the moment, I can mistype command. Nix-channel. What? Oh, right. Okay. I can mistype my commands. That's great. First of all, we got the idea of channels. Channels are basically the same thing as an apt channel or the Microsoft App Store stable channel or anything like that. I currently don't have any channels defined on my system, so I'm going to quickly do that. First of all, with the current stable channel, -21.11, Nixpkgs. Okay, that's been added. Now I'll add unstable just because it can be cool to be on the bleeding edge for some things. And just for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to add an old channel. This one is from about 4 years old, 2018. And so now, each channel has an alias that can be used in the Nix commands to specify exactly what you're wanting to refer to. But Nixpkgs is actually the default. So a lot of the commands that I'm going to show you are going to be pulling from the current stable channel. But having just added the channel doesn't change anything. I need to actually do some updates here. So Nix channel update. Oh, and I typed something wrong. NixOS 21.11. That totally exists. Great. Okay. Now I have to reveal a little bit more than I wanted to a little early. Oh, I see. I mistyped all of them. Oh well, I'm just going to remove that one. We won't need it for this talk. Are you serious? Promise y'all, I rehearsed this several times. There we go. Okay. So update is running. Update isn't actually going to install any software on my machine. Instead, what update does is for each channel, it goes to a page that looks like this, which contains quite a lot of information. But the most important part is this file right here. We'll zoom in so y'all can see it. This tar file is actually an archive of the 21.11 branch of a particular GitHub repo where all of these derivations are being stored. And they update these basically nightly. Obviously, seeing as it is a stable branch, it doesn't get a lot in the way of updates other than security updates. But it really is just one description file in the or a very large description tree with many thousands of files, all written in the Nix expression language. Let's have some more fun, though. That just gets stuff. Let's actually see what this is good for. We got three different ways, well, three primary ways of installing software on Nix. And the first one, the one that I use most often at work, I'm just going to go into a Python 2 directory right here. I put a I've forgotten my commands. What is, yeah. I put a basic Python application here. It's a Python 2 app. It won't run with Python 3. So let's say that I want to actually run this. First of all, no Python is installed on my machine. There's lots of help about how to do it. I'm going to start out by saying, okay, I just want Python 2. And it goes out and it grabs it. And now Python is on my machine. But very importantly, Python is only available in this particular shell that is running. It is not available anywhere else. Nix does this through a lot of path shenanigans, and it does it through a lot of link shenanigans, which I'll show you more of later. But at this point, of course, I can run that Python app. I have another one, though. Got a Python 3 app. Does the same thing, but it's in Python 3 syntax. And in fact, if I go to the Python 2 application, can't run it because this shell over here only has Python 3 available. It does not have Python 2 available. These two things can no longer conflict, which if you know anything about the history of Python, you know is kind of a big deal because the Python 2 to Python 3 upgrade has been very long and very painful and full of all kinds of painful conflicts. Now, of course, okay, so I've taken Python 3 out of this environment. For convenience purposes, though, wait, which Python? Make sure it's not actually there. Good, it's not. For convenience purposes, though, let's say I don't want to actually have to remember what environment is involved with my package or with my project. There's a nice convenient file that I've written. This is what a Nix derivation looks like. The purpose of this file is to create a shell that contains Python 3. It can also contain additional things that I may want. We start out with basic parameter declaration, where I say that this function requires a packages parameter. And if no packages parameter is being specified, then I pull from, whoops, I renamed that. I pull from the Nixpkgs channel. In that, I'm going to reference a function that's within the channel known as mkshell. It's all about creating a shell that has particular things, that has various things in it. And in it, I'm going to include Python 3. In order to activate this, cool, I just typed this one Nix shell command, and I got me a Python here. I can even make this even more convenient, because the D'Gerinel tool, which is it's certainly on Mac OS and Linux. It may also be on Windows. It actually understands the Nix shell. So if I cd into that directory now, instantly, Python is in the path. Obviously, this is a pretty trivial example. With 1Password, I have a vastly more extensive example that I use for my development environment. That will be the last thing that I show you today. But I can go ahead and briefly show you a Rust environment. Which is a little bit broken at the moment. Before I close the file, this environment is going to install Rust, which I have specified at a very precise version, 1.59. It'll also install the default Rust analyzer and GTK4 and package config, because GTK4 requires that. It's GTK's way of deciding that it knows most about package management. And okay, Rust has just been installed on my machine. There we go. This might be kind of a scary path. We'll talk about why it's that way in a bit. By the way, all of this and this shell business, this is why I run Vim instead of VS Code. Because Vim launches within a shell, it launches with all of the tools that I have specified and that have gotten added to my path there. That is a lot harder to do with GUI applications. So all of my development ends up being in Vim because I can have all of these isolated shells. And at least on my home machine, I've got a lot of projects of varying ages and varying dependencies, and maybe I don't actually want to update all of them. By the way, having left that directory, Rust is no longer in my path. Now, that said, the shell path is really great for development environments. It is not so great if, say, I want a music player installed on my machine, because anything that's put into the shell isn't going to appear in my desktop launcher. Like, it's just not there because it's not part of the desktop launcher environment. So we've got a second command that we can use here. And I want to install a media player, so I will use the nixenv command, which is all about manipulating my personal profile. And I'm just going to tell it to install Rhythmbox. And no, it was not already installed. I was suddenly having this fear that, yes, it's already there. Of course, I also have to give the correct path because for some reason, Nix shell and nixenv use different syntax. There we go. Okay. Apparently I did install Rhythmbox last night, so that was a very, very fast process. So now, though, I got myself a media player. Of course, if I decide that I don't want that anymore, oops. Hang on. Need to give my shell a moment to actually update. Oh dear, what have I done wrong? Somehow I am not removing it from the path. Did I install it globally? I may have installed it globally. Huh. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, sorry, I just messed up my whole demonstration by having Rhythmbox installed in the global package set. There we go. I haven't done that with Inkscape, so I have to do this just to prove things to you all. I'll install Inkscape. Just taking longer than I expected. Okay, while that's running, would anybody like to jump in with questions? Because I can answer 1 or 2 questions at the moment. And of course, there'll be lots of time at the end. Okay.
I was just trying to wrap my head around the whole idea of why do I need the NixOS?
We'll get to that. Although I might not answer the question of why you need it. I just might answer the question of why it might be really cool to be running and how it would benefit you. In any case, now Inkscape is installed, it's running. Now I have to figure out how to get it to let me leave because Control Q doesn't work until we get there. Or maybe Control Q just doesn't work. Great. Now I'm going to uninstall it. Now, when I uninstall it, it's not just Inkscape itself that gets taken out of my path. Literally everything it depends on gets taken out. It's still sitting on my disk, but the bookkeeping that Nix provides will actually cause it to be removed later on when I collect garbage, which is going to be pretty close to the end of my talk. Now, like I said, there's 3 ways to install things, and I've already hinted at the third one, which is the global environment. This is where NixOS actually takes all of the ideas of Nix and goes kind of to the extreme. We got actually, we've got several configuration files, but this is the root one, and this one may include additional ones. And with this file, this is how I actually declare the global state of my system. Everything including the exact version of 1Password that I want to run, actual bootloader parameters. Oh, I haven't specified a particular kernel on here, but I could actually specify an exact kernel. Time zone, network configuration, whether or not I'm going to actually run a Nix server, and here we go, packages that should be installed for all users on the system. I don't know if you noticed, but a little while ago when I was installing and removing packages, I was doing it as an ordinary user. This actually ends up being, it's definitely an unusual thing. It ends up being safe from many perspectives simply because anything that I install as an ordinary user is only included in my own profile. No other user will have it. Even root won't have access to those because it's just not part of the root profile. probably the most dangerous thing that I can do with that is, say, installing so much that I run the system out of disk space. But it's not a way for me to install tools that I can use to like compromise this system itself. If I wanted to compromise the entire system, I either have to do an actual real life kernel hack, or I have to install the tools somewhere in this configuration file so that we get the global system configuration. And once I have these, and actually, James, did a new version of 1Password go to beta today?
Not yet. And
Okay.
might be tomorrow morning.
Okay, then I can't demonstrate upgrading. We'll just add Chromium to the system though, just because. Having now added it to the list of packages that I want installed globally, I give the rebuild command. And this will have effect for all users on the system. Chromium, if this was a multi-user system, Chromium would then be available to other users on the system. It also has some fun things that if it installs a new kernel, the old kernel sticks around. I can actually boot the old kernel if I need to. If it installs a newer version of GNOME, which to some degree I kind of hope it does because of all of the glitches I'm having. It didn't. I could go back to an old version of GNOME if the new one is really, really messed up. But as demonstrated, Chromium is now installed, and now you start to see a little bit more of the paths that get involved in this system, which starts getting to how does all of this actually work? And to demonstrate that, I'm going to actually start out as the root user because it's got a more pristine path than my own personal user. You will note, although it's going to be hard to see, so maybe you won't note it, there are certain common paths such as user bin, sbin, user sbin, that aren't present in my path. And the reason for that is that on a NixOS system, that's the only thing that exists in bin. The only thing that's in user bin, if I can type it correctly, is env. Begs the question, why would we do that? And that's because every single package that gets installed on a Nix system goes into a particular directory. And it's the Nix store directory, which is a huge directory. In fact, it has 34,000 entries on here. Like I said, Nix manages a lot of this through link shenanigans, path shenanigans. The path shenanigans aren't really that extensive, at least for a normal user profile, because this is the path. All of the globally installed applications end up being here, except they're not actually there. Keep forgetting that I don't have that installed in my root profile. Everything that gets installed in this current system binaries directory, it's actually a link to a very particular version that's been declared in the system. This has a whole bunch of advantages, actually. Between that and with the way each package gets installed in an isolated way, I have a large number of versions of glibc installed on this machine, and I don't have to worry about them conflicting with one another. Pretty common problem on Linux, with glibc being a very, very, very fundamental library that older applications just can't run on new Linux machines because they depend on a version of glibc that isn't on the new Linux machines. And most of the time, the various versions conflict with one another. You basically have to have the latest version of glibc on your machine. You can't really have old versions very well. But again, sandboxing, profiles, all of these things mean that, in fact, we can keep the old versions around, and older applications can still use those. So another part of all of this is, okay, I'm talking about how we can have old versions around. This actually goes a little bit further. Whoops. Of course, I showed you that current system bin is a whole bunch of links. What I didn't show you is that current system itself is a link. Again, it is a link to a place in the Nix store, which contains all of these files, but it also contains, we'll just show you this. It also contains links to what kernel version is currently running. It contains a link to all of the kernel modules that are running. It contains a link to, well, most of the things in the etc directory as well. Eventually, I will learn resolve.conf. Resolve.conf is actually a real file. But let's see here. What is not? Okay. Maybe a quasi bad example. Wait a second. Hang on. Okay, etc is a real directory. So there are still things that are real files on here. There are also portions of these files that are versioned. And when I say versioned, what I mean there is that this root system, or this global system, I've got a whole bunch of old versions still installed. I could actually flip back to, say, the version of the system that I was running way back on March 17th, because Nix isn't going to delete these, and it will actually keep this entire snapshot. And these snapshots end up being cheap because so many of the things that it puts into the snapshot are just links to real things that are in the overall database. Of course, this also means that files don't really get deleted by default. But if I decide that the most recent rebuild command that I ran, like the one that installed Chromium, maybe I shouldn't have done, I can actually just roll back the system. And we go from version 73 to 72, and Chromium is no longer available. When I boot my machine, and this is like the one thing that I really can't show you because obviously I can't boot the machine right now, my bootloader will actually list off all, not 73, but all 73 minus 14 versions of Nix that are installed on this system. If I do an upgrade and discover that, say, the X system or Wayland or whatever isn't actually bootable, I'm not actually stuck. I can reboot the machine, go back to a previous version that actually still is good. This applies to everything. This even applies to the kernel, to the point that at one point, using the descriptor file, I was able to actually do a kernel bisect, for lack of a better word, or for, lack of a better word, and track down the exact version of a kernel that had broken sleep on my system. And then I was able to go to that version. And it was far easier than it was if I had to like load up the kernel source tree from Git and compile it and install it and keep on managing it, because Nix handles all of that for me. So let's do some cleanup here. First of all, I want to clean up some of the old stuff because the Nix store actually takes up a lot of space. So I'm just going to collect garbage, which goes through. It automatically deletes everything that currently isn't linked in any of the user profiles, any of the system profiles. However, all of the old system generations are actually still present. Nix var Nix profiles system. And so like we've got profiles going back to, like, again, May 17th. Well, let's just say I don't really want anything. I mean, anything that's more than 10 days old, I'm definitely not going to go back to. So let's remove those. Got several versions of 1Password here, even all the way back to version 8.5. And once this process is done, I'm pretty sure even 8.5 won't still be on my machine. But this is how Nix does all of the cleanup. Once you've decided that you are done with an old generation of a profile, you can remove the profile. And because it no longer has any links to it, Garbage Collector will go through and delete it. And sometimes that can clear up a shocking amount of disk space. In this case, it only cleared up 13 gigs. That's not bad, actually. I believe a few days ago, I cleaned up over 100 gigs on my personal machine, and suddenly I've got breathing room on that machine now. So there we go. There's one last thing I want to show you, but because it takes a while, I'm going to get that process started. And while that's running, I will open everything for questions. Oh, Mitch, no, I don't run Emacs. I've tried a couple of times. It just doesn't work for me. Oh, I don't actually have Slack up. Ricky, if you're able to, can you read off any questions that people are asking?
Sure. It looks like Tim would like to see the output of mount-l if you did not show them that already.
Oh, I did not. Where's my terminal? Here we go. Is this really the syntax that you want, or should we?
That should be fine. I'm just interested in like run is actually TMPFS. Okay, that's what I was interested in. So all of the links are just populated on boot time.
Yep.
And if something
at least
fails,
for that,
yeah.
At least for that directory. Like in the Nix store, obviously nothing can be populated at boot time because that would be too costly.
But run is ephemeral, so
yep.
It doesn't exist when you boot, so you need to populate
Right.
all of the links somehow.
Yes. So when I select a particular OS generation to boot, whether it's generation 73 or 69 or whatever, the bootloader the bootloader will create that run directory, and it will go off and it will find generation 73, which is not in an ephemeral disk.
Bootloader. So it's on grub completely?
No, it's or maybe I'm using the wrong term there. Because I don't think I'm even running grub on this machine. I think I'm running UEFI. It's whatever the initial boot process is. I haven't built Linux from scratch and thus touched those things in 20-some years, so I've literally forgotten everything. But since the actual, like I was saying, since the, hang on, trying to do copy and paste here.
That's okay.
Since the entire list of profiles is in a persistent directory, or is on a persistent disk, then it just knows to go look for the profile that I just selected here, and that's how it's going to populate run.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense. Since a lot of people here, I guess I'm not going to use the NixOS like
probably not
on a system level.
Nope.
But I know that it is available as a package manager on multiple systems like macOS, or I even saw it in Debian. I probably might try. So I'm curious, where should we all start? Like, what's the best approach to try it out?
So the best approach to try it out, somewhere on their website, and they've moved things around, but they do have a script that will install Nix as single user on basically any of the platforms that they support. So that is basically any Linux. I know that it works pretty well on Mac OS because I've used it there. I used it there for several years. I don't know about Windows, but that might be there as well. So let's see here. If I want to download Nix, I don't want to do a multi-user, or maybe this is a multi-user installation. Okay, this is actually the script that will,
Oh, nice.
or one of the two scripts that will install it.
Something that I was trying to avoid, like to pipe the curl to bash.
Yeah, don't. Download it, read it, and then decide whether to run it.
There is better way for other distributions. The NixOS package is available as RPM or that package, so you can do that.
Oh, they are? Cool.
Yeah.
That part I don't know. I don't know. If you have Nix installed and you want to like start investigating what's in Nixpkgs, you can just go to their GitHub repo. And it's a really huge repo. The whole thing actually starts with this file default.nix, and this one is pretty legible. There's some of these that are pretty difficult to read. Now let's see if the other thing finished. Okay, this did finish. So the last thing I wanted to show you was how I use this for 1Password. Take this over to the side. I do not have Rust installed globally on my system. That is not the name of cargo. There we go. I do, however, have it installed right here. If I decide that this isn't the version that I want, let's say I want to start trying out version 60, or actually, what is the latest version? Are we up to 61 today? Let's try this. I just change that version in the file and read through the really terrible error message. 61 is not available. Whether it has been released or not, it is not available in these tools. I know 60 is though, because I tried it last night. Goes through, downloads all of the dependencies, which is more than normal because I'm including the Rust compiler for WASM and Android in here. And I'm on Rust version 60. What gets fun is that I can do the same thing with Electron. This right here is a bunch of stuff that I copied out of the Nix package store. There's supposed to be a shortcut for all of that, and it wasn't working that day, and I couldn't be bothered to fix it. But if I want to install precisely version 18.0.1 of Electron, I quit out and pray that it's not going to build from source. I don't think it does. I think it's building a, yeah, okay, it did that from a tar file. And so now I've got Electron 18 running node 16.13 and so on and so forth, which is really great if I want to start trying things out, but don't actually want to change the entire configuration of my system. The other thing that is great is that if we were to agree upon this name right here, just what is the name of the stable channel, we could share this file and everybody running Linux would have almost exactly the same development environment installed on their machine. Again, with the caveat that it doesn't work quite so well with VS Code. I don't know how well that would work for the Mac OS or Windows users because it's not a question of whether it can work, it's a question of whether anyone put in the effort to actually ensure that the correct packages get installed on those platforms. But at this point, like I can totally make OPH. I think I left it on version, yeah, still on Rust version 1.60. So there we go. That was the last thing that I wanted to show you all. And so now I can open it for any additional questions as well as showing off additional parts of the system. Mac OS, great as long as the packages build. And Ivan, Mac actually, like I said, I did run this on Mac OS for a long time. It was absolutely fantastic for when I was a consultant and having to do different versions of Ruby or different versions of Python based on which client I was working for. And Ruby was the problem child because the Ruby package management system didn't like to play nice.
Yeah, I use it for managing my dot files, and it's really good for certain plugins and like Vim versions and stuff like that. But yeah, some packages don't quite build on Mac OS, which is a shame. But you know, that's what it is.
Yeah. Using Nix as much as I have, while the Nix language itself is not actually the greatest thing in the world, my biggest frustration is when I want to start working with a particular programming language and somebody had some idea of what a package manager for that programming language should look like and that it should be supreme over all others, and literally will not play nice with Nix. And then I have to do a lot of digging to see what other people have figured out in order to make it work. And it's really kind of a pain. And I blame it on everybody seems to think that they know how best to build a package manager. And so we've brain drained into Cargo and Cabal and Stack and Maven and Bundler and Pip and so on and so forth. Ricky, are there any additional questions?
I have one. I'm sorry. Have you tried it with Docker? Like
inside Docker or running Docker containers?
Instead of using like a Docker file to install things, just use the NixOS environment to install all of the dependencies.
Into a Docker image, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I have not. I have found the instructions for doing so. What's kind of shocking about it is that typically when people use Nix to build a Docker image, the image ends up actually being significantly smaller than anything else. I have seen examples in which they build, I don't remember what it was. Like they built, nope, I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to say totally the wrong thing. But they do end up with images that are shockingly small. And sometimes there's like a program in there and the image ends up being even smaller than like the Alpine Linux image. And I don't know how they manage that, but yeah.
I need to try that then.
I think that's because because Nix tracks like all your dependencies and what are inputs, what are used for build time versus what's used for runtime. I believe the way that works is it ends up just building everything and only copies essentially what you want left over in your containers, like your runtime or your tools and things like that. The regular way you'd build like a Docker image, because you're going to install like the tools you need to build the intermediate stuff. I think a lot of those artifacts end up being left over in the final Docker image. But when Nix does it, because it knows, okay, you actually don't need this stuff anymore, you don't have references to it, it ends up giving you a much smaller image that you have. And so I think that's how they end up squeezing a lot of that size down.
Okay. I would guess that, but can't actually say it because I haven't really studied it myself. I can say that when I've tried to build a Docker image that contains Rust myself, I end up with a 2 GB image, and it's like there's 800 megs of documentation, and Docker doesn't provide any way for me to actually remove that from my final image. Maybe they do now. 2 years ago, they didn't.
The only reason I'm asking that because even Alpine or Debian or Ubuntu images, they still require like you specifying versions, but you need to be sure that those versions are available in the repositories.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't, or sometimes the specific versions are like very tricky to install. Like I remember dancing around Ruby, and that was a nightmare. Luckily, we don't have to do that anymore, but you never know. Like with Rust and everything, we might end up hard coding some of those versions.
Yeah.
So yeah, specifying it through Nix might help to build a specific expected environment and reproducible.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be pretty cool if, at least on the desktop team, I got a couple of other people who are interested in having that shell.nix file, and we experimented with using it. I'm not going to propose that we start considering moving our CI infrastructure over to a Nix build environment. That is quite a much bigger. Okay, Ivan, you and me got to talk. If you're not in the Linux working group channel, you'd probably enjoy it.
I'll check it out. Thanks.
Okay. I'm actually considering renaming it, since it's no longer a Linux working group, into just a Linux user group. So we've got the 1Password lug. Okay. Ricky, do you have any questions?
Yeah, it looks like there's one in Slack from Renee. How well does Nix play with cargo in its home hidden cargo directory?
It's not great. There are actually some good tools. Here's a demonstration that I didn't show but did have prepared. I'll go back to that graphics application. And actually, I'm going to free up some processor. Where was it? Oh, yeah. Documents. So for a normal developer shell, basically Cargo is going to be using whatever its default location is, which I think, yeah. So I think it's managing it still out in squiggle/.cargo. So far as this goes, the only benefit I get, Renee, is that I know which version of my tools get installed, and then I can depend on Cargo and the cargo.lock file. So at this point, though, I can build it and it's going to run. Oh, wait, not if I did cargo build. Now, when I want to build something to be distributed for Nix, the file, instead of using the mk shell command that I showed, in fact, I'll show that again. Instead of using this mk shell command, I actually use build Rust package, where people have gone to quite a lot of effort to figure out how to make Rust work correctly on Nix. Unfortunately, with this, I don't get any of the benefits of caching the crates, because it ends up building in a completely fresh, not exactly a true root, but pretty close to it every single time. So like, file's wrong on the system. So like right now, the idea is that the build environments all need to be hermetically sealed, and that they should only contain things that are referenced in that builds.nix or in that default.nix file. So it's going to pull down everything, and it's not going to have a cargo.cache. There's some work that's been done around it to and it's not very well maintained, unfortunately, but there are programs that will take a cargo.lock file and create a massive unreadable Nix expression that will install each one of your cargo dependencies as its own separate entry in the Nix store. And at that point, you do get the benefits of caching, because I mean, it's not going to change what's there unless you change your lock file. But those files are pretty big, and at least for contribution to the Nixpkgs repository, like, oh, Ivan, you and me got to talk. Oh, we got to talk. Which one do you maintain?
I maintain one called Crane. It's pretty small. I haven't
Okay.
marketed it very, very widely, but I've been in the internals of that stuff. We should talk.
Yeah, we should talk, because I've used Carnix and I've used Cargo to Nix, and there's so many gotchas. Like,
Yeah, I
Cargo to
used
Nix
Nirsk for a while. I think if that's the pronunciation of it, and I
Yeah.
got fed up with some of its API quirks and ended up writing my own. But yeah, there's lots of trade-offs.
Yeah. In any case, unfortunately, so far as the community that maintains the Nixpkgs repository goes, the general idea is that for Rust applications or Node applications, like this really applies to everything that has a lock file. You should be using like the build Rust crate or build Rust package or build npm package or whatever. You should not be submitting to them a Nix expression that is derived from a lock file because they're basically unreadable. Okay. Oh, wow. Yep. I mean, this is slow. This particular build is slow even when I'm not running Zoom, and GTK is the entire reason, but whatever. Are there any additional questions?
I think the question that's on everyone else's mind is, how did the two biggest Nix users not connect yet?
That's a good question. Like I'm sorry, Ivan, I didn't know about this, but apparently I didn't know about you, and apparently you didn't know about the Linux channel. So this is gonna be cool.
I tried to see if there was like a Nix channel, but we didn't have a specific one, so I just moved on.
Yep.
But I should have checked the Linux one.
Yep. Okay. So that is all of the material I have, and I'd like to thank you all for attending, because this has been something that, like I said, I've been using it for years. I've tried contributing. I don't always have anything worthwhile to contribute, but I also maintain the way that we distribute 1Password for Nix. And just to reassure everybody, we are not distributing the source code to Nix. Nix actually installs 1Password from our tar file, the one that we actually do distribute. So, yeah. Alrighty. I will upload the script that I used for this presentation after I have added a couple of resource links, and feel free at any time to reach out to me to talk more about this. Back to you, Ricky.
Savanni. Yeah, I actually had one quick question that I'm not sure was covered, and I apologize. Is there Nix for Raspbian or Raspberry Pi build?
There is. In fact, I am running that. Oh,
Awesome.
oh, now I have to show that. Hang on. Let's see if I can share my screen again. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. There we go. You got my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, can I log in from this machine? I can through a very roundabout thing. On my Raspberry Pi, I don't have any normal users, and the only login is available through an SSH key. So, so I will first of all hope that my laptop didn't completely mess up my sound. Ping me if I'm talking and somebody else is trying to. So I'm going to first log into my laptop. Cool. Now, there we go. This is my Raspberry Pi. And its configuration is relatively simple. I've got some scripts that I added, but it's like, here we go. Here's the Pi bootloader. Here's the file system. What I don't have declared in here, like this is only the internal file system. I never declared the Btrfs RAID file system that's actually attached to it, but I could if I had any idea of the syntax. Networking options, this is the only port that, okay, well, there's a few ports that I allow. And then this is the software that I've got installed, most of which is just for maintaining it. Its actual real purpose is for this application, which can't be installed as just a normal package. Seeing as it is a service, it needs some additional special things for being able to run properly on NixOS. And so that's why the syntax there is different. So yeah, is there. I will say it's not easy to get up and running, but 99% of my trouble was getting my Raspberry Pi to actually boot from a micro SD card. Or no, from a USB stick.
One of the really nice things about having your machines configured and sort of deployed this way, like I also use NixOS to deploy to my Raspberry Pi, is I actually have a CI/CD pipeline that when I build changes, it'll build those like packages, it'll cache them, and then I can deploy it. I have not actually automatically pushing to my Raspberry Pi. That's something I'm interested in doing at some point, but it's just so cool that you could like make a one-line change and like upgrade your kernel or something with just like a quick push like that. So which I have not seen before I used NixOS. So it's pretty awesome.
By the way, Ivan, do you see where I'm going with this?
Yep. Yep.
It is possible. There are several different tools of varying degrees of maturity for being able to declare servers in the Nix language and then being able to just push all of this stuff out to the servers. Like this is the description for my matrix server, which starts out with a magical stanza to actually make it work correctly in DigitalOcean. But then it's like, here's where I want to deploy to. Here's the user that we're going to deploy as. Here's my networking configuration. It's pretty nice once you can get it working. It's tricky to get working. It also doesn't help that most of the documentation tries to point you to NixOps, which is basically not documented and also going through a very incompatible version shift. So yeah. Okay. I believe that is all the time we have. So as I said, feel free to reach out to me and I will get my script with various resources posted for you.
Thanks so much,
Back
Savanni.
to you, Renee. Okay. Bye, everyone.